There is a specific smell to a funeral home. It's a mixture of heavy lilies, industrial carpet cleaner, and the expensive, polished wood of things designed to be buried. It's the smell of finality. I was standing in the showroom of the Tranquil Oaks mortuary, staring at a mahogany casket with brass handles. It cost $6,000. The funeral director, a man named Mr. Henderson who spoke in a whisper that felt like a sales tactic, was standing a respectful 3 feet behind me. "It's a dignified choice, Ethan," he said softly. "Solid mahogany. Velvet interior. Your father was a man of taste, for what Sarah tells me. An architect deserves structure." I nodded, feeling that numb, hollow vibration in my chest that comes when you lose the last anchor to your childhood. I am 34 years old. I manage global supply chains for a logistics firm. My life is built on tracking things, containers, shipments, timelines. I deal in facts. I deal in hard data. But death is the one variable you can't manage. "We'll take it," I said. My voice sounded thick. "Sarah wants the service on Saturday. Is that enough time to prepare him?" "We can expedite," Henderson said, making a note on his clipboard. "Your sister is in the front office signing the intake forms and the authorization for the cosmetic restoration. She mentioned it was a closed casket due to the nature of the stroke." I flinched. Sarah had told me over the phone, sobbing, that the stroke had been catastrophic. That dad's face, the face that had taught me to shave, to drive, to read a blueprint, was distorted beyond recognition. She had begged me not to view the body. Remember him as he was, Ethan. Please. For me. I had agreed. I was the coward who lived 3 states away. She was the saint who stayed. I felt I owed her that deference. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Long, insistent vibrations against my thigh. I pulled it out, intending to silence it. I looked at the screen. Caller ID, Shady Pines Senior Living. My stomach dropped. They were calling to offer condolences, or maybe to ask when I would be coming to clear out his room. I couldn't handle that conversation right now. I was about to write a check for a $6,000 box, but the phone kept buzzing. Logistics instinct took over. Answer the call. Solve the problem. "Excuse me 1 second," I muttered to Henderson. I walked into the hallway, away from the caskets. I slid the green icon. "Hello. This is Ethan. Mr. Miller?" The voice on the other end was clipped, annoyed. It was the head nurse, rigorous and usually unflappable. "I'm calling because we have a situation with your father." "I know," I said, closing my eyes. I'm actually at the funeral home right now. We're making the arrangements. I'll come by tomorrow to pick up his things." There was a silence on the line. A long, static-filled pause. "Mr. Miller," the nurse said slowly, "I don't think you understand. I'm calling because your father is throwing a fit in the dining room. He is refusing to take his blood pressure medication until he gets blueberry pancakes. He claims you promised them to him on Tuesday." The world stopped. The smell of lilies vanished. The hush of the funeral home evaporated. My brain, usually a high-speed processor of data, ground to a halt. "Excuse me," I whispered. "My father passed away last night. My sister, Sarah, called me at 2 a.m. She said he had a massive stroke in his sleep." "Mr. Miller," the nurse said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "I'm looking at your father right now. He is watching The Price is Right. He is eating a cup of applesauce. He is very much alive. In fact, his vitals are better than they were last week." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand gripped the phone so hard I thought the glass might crack. "Are you sure?" I asked. It was a stupid question. "I'm holding his chart, sir. Sarah hasn't been here in 3 days. We've been trying to reach her all morning to approve a prescription refill, but she's not answering." I didn't answer. I turned around. Through the glass partition of the hallway, I could see into the front office. Sarah was there. My sister, the martyr, the caregiver. She was wearing a black dress, a tissue pressed to her nose, her shoulders shaking with what looked like racking sobs. She was sitting across from the funeral director's assistant. There were papers spread out on the desk. Contracts. But she wasn't crying. I watched her. I saw her put the tissue down for a split second to check her watch. It was a sharp, calculated movement. She tapped her pen against the desk, impatient. She looked at the assistant, pointed at a line on the paper, and signed with a flourish. She wasn't mourning. She was executing a transaction. "Mr. Miller?" the nurse asked. "Are you there?" "Don't tell him," I said. My voice was different now. It was cold. "Don't tell my father I'm on the phone. And do not, under any circumstances, let my sister into that building." "Sir, what is going on?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. "And get in the pancakes." I hung up. I stood in the hallway of the funeral home. I looked at the $6,000 casket. I looked at my sister, who was currently weeping over a death that hadn't happened. Most people would have stormed into that office. Most people would have screamed. I didn't. I'm a logistics manager. When you find a discrepancy in the manifest, you don't yell at the shipping container. You track the error to its source. You find out what is missing. I put my phone in my pocket. I took a deep breath. I walked back into the showroom. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I need a moment with my sister to discuss the payment options." "Of course," he said, bowing his head. I walked toward the office. I wasn't just walking into a family dispute. I was walking into a crime scene. To understand the magnitude of the lie, you have to understand the architecture of our family. My father, Robert Miller, was a man of steel and stone. He was a commercial architect who built half the skyline in downtown Seattle. He was precise, demanding, and distant. He believed that affection was shown through provision. He paid for college. He paid for cars. He didn't pay for hugs. I was the son who left. I moved to Chicago, then New York. I built a career in supply chain management that mirrored his own obsession with order. I sent checks. I sent Christmas cards. I visited twice a year. Sarah was the daughter who stayed. She was 6 years older than me. 40 now. She had always been the creative one, which in our family was a euphemism for unemployed. She bounced between failed pottery businesses, life coaching certifications, and multi-level marketing schemes. She was chaotic, emotional, and fiercely resentful of my stability. When Dad's dementia started to creep in 3 years ago, the vascular kind, the slow erosion of the coastline, Sarah moved back into the big house on the hill. "I'll take care of him, Ethan," she had told me over the phone, her voice thick with martyrdom. "You're too busy with your fancy job. You can't be expected to wipe his chin. I'll do it. It's my burden." It was a trap, of course. We both knew it. By moving in, she secured a rent-free mansion. She secured access to his grocery allowance. She secured the narrative. Sarah the saint, Ethan the abandoner. But I let her do it. That was my sin. I paid the property taxes. I paid the nursing home fees when we finally had to move him to Shady Pines 6 months ago. I paid Sarah a stipend of $3,000 a month to manage his affairs. I thought I was buying his comfort. I didn't realize I was funding her resentment. The financial setup was rigid, or so I thought. Dad had a revocable living trust. I was the successor trustee, but only upon his death or incapacitation confirmed by 2 physicians. Until then, Sarah held the medical power of attorney and a limited financial power of attorney for day-to-day maintenance. The trust was worth about $2 million, mostly in the house and his collection. Dad collected things: rare grandfather clocks, first edition architectural tomes, and gold coins. He didn't trust banks after 2008. He kept about $200,000 in gold Krugerrands in a floor safe in the library. Sarah knew the combination. I didn't. The friction had started 2 weeks ago. Sarah had called me. "Manic, I need $20,000, Ethan." "For what?" "The house. The roof is leaking. It's ruining Dad's books." "Send me a quote from a licensed roofer," I said. "I'll pay the company directly." She exploded. "You don't trust me. I'm here every day scrubbing his toilets, and you won't trust me with a check? You think I'm stealing?" "I think you're bad with money, Sarah. Send me the quote." She hung up on me. Radio silence for 10 days. Then the call at 2 a.m. The tears. The massive stroke. Now, standing outside the office door in the funeral home, the pieces slammed together in my mind like a car crash. She wasn't grieving. She was panicked. She must have hit a wall. A gambling debt? A loan shark? Or maybe just the crushing weight of her own bad decisions. She needed the gold, but she couldn't just take it. If she emptied the safe while Dad was alive, and I came to visit and noticed, she'd go to jail. But if Dad was dead, the fog of war descended. Grief makes people sloppy. Grief makes people avoid the house. If she held a funeral quickly, a cremation, no body to view, she bought herself a window of time. She could claim the house needed to be cleared out for the estate sale. She could empty the safe, sell the clocks, pawn the silver, and tell me that Dad had sold them years ago to pay for his care, or that they were lost. And who would question the grieving daughter? I watched her through the glass. She was talking to the assistant again. I saw her hand over a credit card. My credit card. The one I had authorized her to use for Dad's medical expenses. She was paying for a fake funeral with my money. I opened the door. The air in the office was warm. Sarah looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She was good. She was really good. Ethan, she choked out, standing up to hug me. Oh God, Ethan. I can't believe he's gone. She wrapped her arms around me. She smelled like heavy perfume and stale cigarette smoke. I stood stiff as a board. I felt her heart beating against my chest. It was fast. Adrenaline. It's okay, I said. My voice was monotone. I didn't hug her back. I'm here now. I was just telling Mr. Jenkins, she said, pulling away and wiping a tear, that we want the cremation done immediately. Dad always said he didn't want to rot in the ground. He wanted to be scattered at the lake. Did he? I asked. I thought he wanted to be buried next to Mom. Sarah froze, just for a microsecond. He changed his mind, Ethan. At the end, the dementia, he got claustrophobic. He made me promise. She looked at me with those wide, pleading eyes. Dare you to call me a liar. Dare you to question his dying wish. I see, I said. Mr. Jenkins, the assistant, pushed a paper across the desk. We just need one more signature, Mr. Miller. This is the authority to cremate. Since you're the next of kin as well, we prefer both signatures. I looked at the document. It was a death warrant for the evidence. Once he was cremated, or once the idea of him was cremated, there was no going back. Actually, I said, picking up the pen. I twirled it in my fingers. I need to go to the house first. Sarah's eyes snapped to mine. Why? Why would you go there? It's a mess, Ethan. The paramedics, there's medical equipment everywhere. It's traumatic. I don't want you to see it. I need his suit, I said calmly. For the memorial service. Even if it's a cremation, we should display his suit. The Navy one. He loved that suit. I already brought a suit, she said quickly, gesturing to a garment bag on the chair. I packed everything. You don't need to go to the house. She was blocking me. She was physically standing between me and the door. Sarah, I said, putting a hand on her shoulder. I squeezed. Hard. I need to get my suit. I left a black suit in the guest closet last Christmas. I didn't pack one. I could go get it for you, she offered, desperate. No, I said. I need to decompress. I need a minute alone in the house where we grew up. Before we say goodbye. I saw the calculation behind her eyes. She was running the scenarios. If she said no, it looked suspicious. If she said yes, I went to the house. But the house was safe, right? Dad wasn't there. He was at Shady Pines. She just needed to keep me away from the nursing home. Okay, she said, forcing a sad smile. Go ahead, but don't stay long. It's spooky without him there. I'm sure it is, I said. I turned to Mr. Jenkins. Don't process anything until I get back. I want to review the itemized bill. I walked out of the funeral home. I got into my rental car. I didn't drive to the house. I drove straight to Shady Pines. Shady Pines is a nice facility. It smells like lemon disinfectant and oatmeal, a sharp contrast to the lilies and formaldehyde I had just left behind. I parked my rental car in the back lot, away from the main entrance, just in case Sarah decided to drive by. I walked through the automatic doors. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, irregular rhythm that defied my usual calm. The receptionist looked up. She didn't offer condolences. She didn't look at me with pity. She just smiled. Mr. Miller? You made good time. Where is he? I asked. My voice was tight. He's in the solarium. He refused to go back to his room until he finished his show. I walked down the hallway. Every step felt heavy, like I was walking underwater. I passed residents in wheelchairs, nurses pushing carts of medication. It was a normal Tuesday. Life was happening here. I turned the corner into the solarium. And there he was. My father, Robert Miller. The man who had built skyscrapers. He was sitting in his favorite recliner, wearing his gray cardigan and the checkered slippers I had sent him for Christmas. He was holding a plastic cup of apple juice in one hand and pointing a remote control at the TV with the other. "Come on," he shouted at the screen. "It's a brand new Honda. Bid $22,000, you idiot." I stopped. I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling over. The relief hit me first, a wave of pure, physical exhaustion. He was alive. He wasn't a charred remain in a cardboard box. He wasn't a memory. He was right there, yelling at the price is right. Then came the rage. It started in my stomach, cold and sharp. My sister had looked me in the eye. She had cried. She had accepted my comfort. She had let me pick out a casket for a man who was currently complaining about the price of a Honda Civic. I took a breath. I pulled out my phone. I didn't walk over to him yet. I switched to the camera app. I hit record. I filmed the room. I filmed the date on the TV screen. I filmed the nurse walking by. Then I zoomed in on Dad. "Dad," I called out softly. He turned. His eyes, slightly cloudy with cataracts but still sharp with that old engineer's intelligence, locked onto me. "Ethan," he squinted. "What are you doing here? It's Tuesday. You work on Tuesdays." I walked over and knelt beside his chair. I took his hand. It was warm. It was real. "I took a personal day, Dad," I said. My voice cracked. I wanted to check on you." "Well, you're late," he grumbled, pulling his hand back to gesture at the nurse. "Where are those pancakes?" I told Sarah on Sunday I wanted pancakes. She said she'd bring them Monday. Haven't seen her since. "She was here Sunday?" I asked, keeping the camera low, still recording. "Came in for 10 minutes, Dad scoffed. "Didn't bring the pancakes. Just brought some papers. Said she needed me to sign a permission slip for a field trip or something. I told her I'm 82. I don't go on field trips. But she nagged until I signed it. My blood ran cold. "What papers, Dad?" "I don't know. My eyes aren't so good with the small print." She said it was for the insurance. Something about updating the beneficiary so the government doesn't take it. She was in a rush. Always in a rush, that girl. He looked at me, his expression softening. "You look tired, son. You working too hard?" "Yeah, Dad," I said, putting the phone in my pocket but leaving the audio recording running. "I'm working on a really big project right now. A cleanup job." "Good," he nodded, turning back to the TV. "Clean it up. Do it right. Don't cut corners." "I won't," I promised. I stood up. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to pack his things and take him out of there right now. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I took him now, Sarah would spin it. She'd claim it was a misunderstanding. She'd say she thought he was dead, that the nursing home made a mistake, that she was just a grieving daughter who got confused. She would play the victim, and she would get away with the papers she had forced him to sign. I needed to know what she was doing at the house. I needed to see the crime in progress. "I have to go, Dad," I said. "I'll be back. I promise. And I'll bring the pancakes." "Blueberry," he shouted as I walked away. "Not the plain ones." I walked back to the nurse's station. I looked at the head nurse. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, "this is a life or death instruction. No one, and I mean no one, is allowed to visit him or take him out. Especially not Sarah. If she calls, tell her he's unavailable. Stall her." Mrs. Higgins looked at my face. She saw the look of a man who was about to dismantle someone. "I understand, Mr. Miller," she said. "I'll put a security hold on his file right now." I walked out into the sunlight. It was blinding. The world looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago, but the axis had shifted. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was hunting. The drive to the house took 20 minutes. It was a winding route up the coastal hills, past the vineyards and the horse properties. Dad had built the house in the 90s, a sprawling mix of glass and timber that overlooked the valley. It was his masterpiece. It was also a fortress. I didn't drive up the main driveway. I knew Sarah. If she was staging a funeral, she was also staging a heist. She wouldn't want witnesses. I parked my rental car a quarter-mile down the road in a turnout used by hikers. I took off my blazer and tie. I rolled up my sleeves. I walked through the woods that bordered the property, moving quietly through the pine needles. I had played in these woods as a kid. I knew every deer trail. I reached the edge of the tree line. The back of the house came into view. There was a truck in the driveway. Not a hearse. Not a cleaning van. A white box truck. Unmarked. Rusty bumper. And, standing on the back deck, were two people. One was Sarah. She had changed out of her grieving black dress. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She was holding a clipboard, directing traffic. The other person was a man I didn't recognize. He was big, heavy-set, wearing a stained tank top and work boots. He was carrying something wrapped in a moving blanket. I crouched behind a rhododendron bush. I pulled out my phone. I zoomed in. The man set the object down to adjust his grip. The blanket slipped. It was the grandfather clock, the 18th century English tall case clock that had stood in the foyer for 30 years. It was worth $25,000 easily. Careful with that. Heavy hands, Sarah hissed. Her voice carried clearly in the crisp air. The buyer is picky. One scratch and he docks us $1,000. It's heavy, lady, the man grunted. Where's the other stuff? The silver is in the dining room, Sarah said, checking her clipboard. And the coin collection is already in the cab. Get the clock in, then we do the paintings. We have to be done by 4 p.m. My brother is coming back. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. She wasn't just stealing. She was liquidating. She was stripping the carcass before the body was even cold. Except there was no body. She was selling Dad's legacy to a fence. I snapped photos. Burst mode. I got the license plate of the truck. I got clear shots of their faces. I got a video of them loading the clock. Then I saw them come out with the boxes. Small, heavy wooden boxes. The Krugerrands. This is the last of it, the man asked. Yeah, Sarah said. She lit a cigarette, something she never did in front of me. She took a deep drag. That's the retirement fund right there. Get out of here. I need the house empty for the wake on Saturday. You sure the brother isn't going to notice? Sarah laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Ethan, please. He's a logistics nerd. He's so paralyzed by procedure, he wouldn't notice if I sold the floorboards. He's going to sign the waiver. I'm going to cremate the body, and by the time he asks about the coins, I'll say Dad spent them on medical bills. It's perfect. She flicked the cigarette, but onto the lawn. Onto the lawn, Dad used a manicure with a pair of scissors. Just get it gone, she said. I lowered the phone. I had enough. I had the nursing home video. I had the theft in progress. I had the confession. The logical part of my brain, the supply chain manager, screamed at me to call the police right now. Interdict the shipment. Stop the loss. But then I looked at Sarah. I looked at the arrogance in her posture. If I called the cops now, they would arrest her. She would cry. She would claim desperation. She would get a lawyer. It would be a messy legal battle. No, that wasn't enough. She wanted a funeral. She wanted a performance. I decided to give her one. I slipped back into the woods. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and called my lawyer in Chicago. Dave, I said when he answered, I need you to file an emergency injunction, but don't serve it yet. Ethan, what's going on? I thought you were at a funeral. I am, I said, watching the white truck rumble past me down the road, filled with my father's life. But the guest of honor is running late. I don't understand. You don't need to, I said. Just draft the papers for immediate removal of power of attorney based on fraud and elder abuse. And call the local sheriff. Tell them I have a felony in progress, but I need them to wait until Saturday morning to execute the warrant. Saturday? Why Saturday? Because, I said, starting the engine. That's when the eulogies are. I drove back to the funeral home. I walked into the office. Sarah was back, sitting in the chair, looking mournful again. She had changed back into the black dress. Ethan, she gasped. Did you find the suit? I did, I lied. And I found something else. What? She asked, her eyes darting around. Peace, I said. I think you're right, Sarah. We should do the cremation. Let's just get it over with. You handle everything. She exhaled, a long, shuddering breath of victory. Oh, Ethan, thank you. You won't regret this. No, I said, looking at the pen in her hand. I don't think I will. Saturday arrived with a gray, persistent drizzle that matched the mood perfectly. The driveway was lined with cars, friends of my father, old colleagues from the architecture firm, neighbors who had known us since we were kids. They all wore black. They all carried casseroles and condolences. Inside, the house felt wrong. It wasn't just the grief, it was the space. The foyer, usually dominated by the 7-foot tall case clock, was empty. Sarah had placed a potted fern there to cover the indentation in the rug. The dining room, usually glinting with the silver tea service, was bare. He wanted a simpler life at the end, Sarah was explaining to Mrs. Gable, the neighbor. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. He told me to donate the silver to the church. He said he didn't need earthly possessions where he was going. Such a saint, Mrs. Gable whispered, patting Sarah's arm. And you, dear, handling all this alone. I stood in the corner, holding a glass of water. I watched the performance. It was masterful. Sarah had staged the living room with folding chairs facing the fireplace. On the mantel sat a brass urn. It was tasteful. It was somber. It was also a vase from the kitchen cabinet that she had bought at Pier 1 Imports 3 years ago. I knew because I was there when she bought it. If everyone could take their seats, the funeral director, Mr. Henderson, looking solemn, announced, "We will begin the celebration of life." The room quieted. About 30 people shuffled into the chairs. The air was thick with the smell of wet wool and lilies. Sarah walked to the front. She stood next to the urn. She looked fragile, beautiful in her grief. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling just enough to break hearts. "My father," she began, "was a man of structure. He built skyscrapers. He built a legacy. But in the end, he was just Dad. And when the stroke took him..." She paused, choking back a sob. It was peaceful. He held my hand. He told me he was ready. A ripple of sympathetic murmurs went through the room. "He also made me promise," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "not to be burdened by his things. He knew how much I sacrificed to care for him these past years. He told me, 'Sarah, sell the collection. Sell the coins. Use the money to find your own happiness. You've earned it.'" I gripped my glass. There it is. The public declaration of the theft, framed as a dying wish. "So," she finished, wiping a tear, "that is what I intend to do. I will honor his memory by living the life he wanted for me." She sat down. People applauded softly. Mrs. Gable was openly weeping. "Thank you, Sarah," Mr. Henderson said. And now his son, Ethan, would like to say a few words. I walked to the front. I didn't have notes. I didn't look sad. I stood next to the mantel. I looked at the urn. I looked at the crowd. Then I looked at Sarah. She gave me a tight, encouraging nod, as if to say, "Don't ruin this." "My sister's right," I said. My voice was calm, projecting to the back of the room. Dad was a man of structure. He believed in documentation, in proof. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I actually have one last memory of Dad to share. A video. Sarah frowned. "Ethan, we agreed. No videos. It's too painful. This one is special," I said. "I think everyone needs to see it." I tapped the screen. I had already connected via Bluetooth to the massive smart TV mounted above the fireplace, right above the fake urn. The screen flickered to life. The audio filled the room. The beep of a heart monitor. The hum of the nursing home HVAC. And then Dad's voice. Clear. Irritated. Alive. "This applesauce is garbage. I told you I want pancakes." The image on the screen was crisp. It was Dad, sitting in the solarium. He was holding a spoon. He looked directly at the camera. A gasp went through the room. Sarah froze. Her face went pale, then red. "Ethan," she hissed, standing up. "Turn that off. That's from last year. How could you?" "Actually," I said, pausing the video, "look at the newspaper on the table next to him." I zoomed in on the freeze frame. The date on the Seattle Times was clearly visible. Friday, October 14th. Yesterday. The room went deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop on the hardwood floor. Mrs. Gable looked from the screen to the urn, then to Sarah. "I visited him yesterday, Sarah," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "He enjoyed the pancakes. He also asked me why you haven't visited in 3 days. And he wants to know where his grandfather clock is." Sarah opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at the guests. Panic, raw, animal panic, flooded her eyes. This is a trick," she stammered. He's confused." The doctor said his blood pressure is 120/80, I interrupted. And the funeral director. I pointed to Mr. Henderson, who looked like he was about to faint. "Mr. Henderson, did you receive a body?" Henderson looked at his clipboard, sweating. "The paperwork, the expedited cremation order. Ms. Miller said. There is no body, I said. I picked up the urn from the mantel. I turned it over. It's a vase, Sarah. It still has the price tag on the bottom. I held it up. Pier 1 Imports. $24.99. You staged a funeral, I said, stepping toward her. For a man who is currently watching The Price is Right. Sarah backed away, knocking over a folding chair. You don't understand. I needed the money. He has so much. He doesn't even know it's gone. He knows, I said. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding. Sarah flinched as if she'd been hit. She looked at the front door. She looked at the back door. I believe that's the sheriff, I said. I told them the service started at 2 o'clock. The arrest was not dignified. When the sheriff's deputies entered the living room, the mourners parted like the Red Sea. They were confused, horrified, and whispering furiously. Mrs. Gable was clutching her casserole dish as if it were a weapon. Sarah Miller? The sheriff asked. He was a big man who didn't look amused. Sarah was backed against the fireplace, trapped between the fake urn and the video of her living father. It's a mistake, she shrieked. My brother is lying. He's trying to steal my inheritance. Ma'am, the sheriff said, holding up a warrant. We have a sworn affidavit from the medical director at Shady Pines confirming Robert Miller is alive. And we have traffic cam footage of a white box truck registered to a Mr. Gary Wilson leaving this property yesterday with what appears to be stolen property. He gestured to the back of the room. Gary, the contractor, Sarah's boyfriend, had been trying to blend in near the buffet table. He froze, a silver candlestick half-stuffed into his jacket pocket. Gary Wilson? The second deputy asked. Gary dropped the candlestick. It hit the floor with a loud clang. He bolted for the French doors. He didn't make it 3 steps. The deputy tackled him into the refreshment table. Punch and cookies went flying. Sarah screamed. Don't touch him. He didn't do anything. You're both under arrest, the sheriff said, snapping the cuffs on Sarah. Elder abuse. Fraud. Grand larceny. And, he looked at the urn, gross abuse of a corpse, though I guess we'll have to downgrade that since there is no corpse. They march her out. She didn't look at me with hate. She looked at me with shock. She couldn't process that her narrative, the one where she was the hero and I was the distant villain, had collapsed so completely. Ethan, she screamed as they dragged her through the front door. Fix this. You have the money. Just pay them. Dad won't press charges. He loves me. I stood on the porch and watched them shove her into the back of the cruiser. The lights flashed against the gray sky. He does love you, I said quietly. That's why this is going to kill him. The fallout was swift and brutal. I spent the next week in a haze of legal paperwork, but this time it was the kind I understood. I filed the emergency petition for guardianship. The judge granted it immediately, given the police report. We recovered the truck. Gary had driven it straight to a storage unit in Tacoma. Everything was there, the clock, the paintings, the silver. The gold coins were missing, but Gary rolled on Sarah in exchange for a plea deal. He told us she'd buried them in the garden. We dug them up, all $200,000 worth. I want to see Dad on Monday. I sat in his room. He was eating lunch. I didn't have the heart to tell him everything. Not yet. Where's Sarah? He asked, chewing a piece of toast. She missed the bus. Sarah is away, Dad, I said. She got into some trouble. She tried to take some things that didn't belong to her. He stopped chewing. He looked at me. His eyes were clear. The clock, he asked. Yeah, I said. And the coins. He sighed. A long, rattling sound in his chest. He looked out the window at the rain. I knew, he said softly. I froze. What? I knew she was taking things, he said. I saw her put the silver in her purse last month. I saw her taking cash from my wallet. Why didn't you tell me? Because, he said, his voice cracking, she's the only one who stayed. I thought if I let her take a little, she'd keep coming back. I didn't want to be alone, Ethan. That broke me. I realized then that the crime wasn't just the theft of money. It was the theft of his dignity. She had leveraged his loneliness. She had charged him a premium for her presence. You're not alone, Dad, I said. I'm moving you. To where? Chicago. No, I said. I quit. I'm consulting now. I can work from anywhere. I'm moving into the house. We're going to get the roof fixed. The right way. He looked at me. He smiled, a real smile this time. Good, he said. But you better learn how to make pancakes. The ones here taste like cardboard. There's a term in the construction business called structural failure. It's when the weight of a building becomes too great for the foundation to hold, and gravity finally wins. But in families, structural failure looks different. It looks like a daughter selling her father's legacy to pay for her mistakes. It looks like a son staying 3 states away because it's easier. And it looks like an old man pretending not to notice the theft because he is terrified of the silence. That was the hardest part of this case. It wasn't the fake funeral. It wasn't the greed. It was the fact that my father was paying a loneliness tax. He was letting Sarah rob him because he thought it was the price of admission for her company. Predators know this. They smell it. They know that grief and isolation are the ultimate blinders. They know that when you are crying, you aren't reading the fine print. They bank on the idea that you'll be too polite, too shamed, or too heartbroken to ask for a receipt. Sarah thought she was the hero of this story. She convinced herself she was owed that money for her time. But caretaking isn't a transaction. Love isn't a billable hour. An inheritance isn't a paycheck you can cash in advance just because you're impatient. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. Trust is not a strategy. Verification is. If a family member rushes a funeral, ask why. If they demand you sign a waiver just to speed things up, put down the pen. And if they tell you that checking the facts is an insult to their love, check them twice. We often say we want to rest in peace, but the living need peace too. And you can't have peace if you're surrounded by people waiting for you to die. I didn't just stop a theft that day. I stopped a slow-motion murder of my father's spirit. I buried the lie so he could finally live. Stay sharp. Stay present. And if someone tells you the dead are speaking, make sure you check for a pulse first. This is Dante, signing off.